Okay, we're going to go ahead and start now with the first presentation. This will be Gina Greer with with the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 7.
Good morning, everybody. Can you see the slides okay? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to start off with a little bit of background on the Flint Hills and prescribed burning, and then Josh Tapp will take over with the rest of EPA's presentation. The Flint Hills region represents the last of the tallgrass prairie, which was once covered in the Midwest from Canada to Texas. Of the 400,000 square miles, 2/3 of that still remains in the Flint Hills region of Kansas and Oklahoma. The Flint Hills landscape is formed from sedimentary rock. Deposits of chert nodules, or flint, in the limestone gives the area its name. The area is impervious to the steel plow and unsustainable to farming, so it was never cultivated, and it preserved the tall grasses. It has shallow, rocky soils from which cultivation was not allowable, and branching practices thrived as the main agricultural activity. In the 1800s, the Native Americans discovered the advantages of annually burning the prairie grasses, which promoted rapid growth during the spring burns and attracted the wild bison herds. Burning, both naturally and anthropogenic, also prevents trees from taking root and sustains the fire-tolerant native species. Today, fire management practices help keep the ecosystem in balance and sustain the economy. A frequent fire regimen controls woody shrubs, invasive species, and reduces wildfires, and increases the species diversity, and provides for higher quality of forage for cattle and increases the weight gains. It is one of the few ecosystems where the prevailing agricultural system works in tandem with the ancestral native ecosystem. Areas not burned for several years develop mature, thick grasses that are less palatable for cattle and less habitable for many of the prairie species. Woody vegetation can take over grassland systems in a relatively short time. The Kansas Flint Hills are home to over 400 species of plants, nearly 150 species of birds, including the iconic greater prairie chicken, 39 species of reptiles and amphibians, and 31 species of mammals. This is a map by Rhett Moeller and Doug Gooden of KSU, which compiles 10 years of information on prescribed burning in the article Mapping Burned Areas in the Flint Hills of Kansas and Oklahoma, 2000 to 2010. With this map, you can tell the annual burning, or the frequency of burning, from annually every year to primarily 3 to 5 years. This map helps us to better understand the frequency of prescribed burning and the effects of human and natural systems.
Okay, good afternoon. This is Josh Tapp. I'm the Chief of the Air Planning Branch in EPA's Region 7 office, and I'm going to take the discussion a little bit into the regulatory realm at this point. So as we look at the next slide here, so why is air quality protection and public health an issue in this region, and why are EPA and KDHE involved? Well, the answer is that all areas of the country are required to comply with the health-based national ambient air quality standards that you see in front of you on the slide. There are 6 principal pollutants for which EPA has created these ambient air quality standards. They include ozone, fine particulate matter, which is the PM2.5, coarse particulate matter, which is the PM10, nitrogen dioxide, lead, sulfur dioxide, and carbon monoxide. So you see a slide in front of you now that should be a table showing the numerical standards for each of these pollutants. Now in 2003, 2009, 2010, and 2011, smoke from the Flint Hills impacted the fine particulate matter and ozone standards at several monitor sites in Kansas. And in fact, there's evidence that this smoke impacts occurred as far downwind as Lincoln, Nebraska, possibly Chicago, Illinois, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and maybe even on out to New Jersey. So these burns can have far-reaching impacts, and it's not really a surprise given the fact that the Flint Hills fires can emit as much air pollution in an 8-week period as some large industrial plants may emit over an entire year. So also, you can see I've circled there PM 2.5 and ozone. Those are the two pollutants that we primarily see impacts from the Flint Hills fires. One other point of note is that we're required by the Clean Air Act to revise or review these standards once every 5 years. And so sometimes when we review these, we make them more stringent, sometimes we make them less stringent, and sometimes we leave them alone, or sometimes we remove them altogether. So depending on what happens on those 5-year reviews, that can also impact what happens with the regulatory actions related to smoke in the Flint Hills. Next slide. So let's step back for a second and talk through some of the Clean Air Act fundamentals. The state and EPA have separate and distinct roles under the Clean Air Act. The state's role is to develop and enforce plans which manage air pollution in order to protect the national ambient air quality standards. EPA's role is to oversee state plan development and implementation and support state efforts to maintain healthy air quality. So, what if there are violations of the national ambient air quality standards? Well, there's a general process that can be varied depending on the nature of the issue, but in general, 3 steps are followed. EPA and the states first consult on an air quality plan, on the existing plan, and what new plans may be required. Second, the state develops a new plan to reduce emissions in order to protect these national health-based standards. And then third, EPA reviews and takes actions on these states' plans. But the question comes up, well, what happens if the state has taken all reasonable actions to prevent a violation, or the violation was completely out of the state's control? Well, there are established procedures for exceptional circumstances, or in this case, what we call exceptional events under the Clean Air Act. There are 3 principal documents that speak to this issue. One is Section 319 of the Clean Air Act. The second one is the 1998 Interim Air Quality Policy on Wildland and Prescribed Fires, which may be updated soon. And then finally, the 2007 Exceptional Events Rule. So those are the 3 documents that we usually use to look at exceptional events. So what is the definition of an exceptional event? It's an event that affects 1, air quality, 2, is not reasonably controllable or preventable, and 3, is an event caused by human activity that is unlikely to recur in a particular location. The exceptional event demonstration is a 4-part test, so if the state feels like they've recorded monitor values that do represent an exceptional event, they would have to make this case before EPA. 1, that the event satisfies the statutory definition of an exceptional event, which is what we just went through on the previous slide. 2, there's a clear causal relationship between the measurement under consideration and the event that is claimed to have affected the air quality in the area. 3, the event is associated with a measured concentration in excess of normal historical fluctuations. In other words, it was a very abnormal value that was recorded and wouldn't normally be seen without this event. And then finally, there would have been no exceedance or violation of the health-based standard, but for the fact that this event occurred and impacted downwind monitors. However, paramount to any exceptional event are 3 issues. 1 is the protection of public health. That has to be the #1 priority for the state. 2, timely notification to the public regarding air quality episodes. So despite whether the state could control the event or not, they are required to provide notice to the public to make sure that the public can possibly change their behaviors to avoid exposure. And then finally, in the case of prescribed fires, which is what the Flint Hills fires are, the state must implement best smoke management practices or a smoke management program. Now, given this, you might ask the question, could the Flint Hills fires qualify as an exceptional event? And the answer to that question is possibly, but not without the state implementing the best smoke management practices or a smoke management program. Okay, in its guidance, EPA has laid out what it thinks are 7 solid principal provisions related to what might be in a smoke management program. I'll just kind of go over those briefly here. The first one is that there's a process for granting approval to conduct prescribed burns. 2, there's a method for minimizing air pollution emissions. 3, there's an outline smoke management they've outlined smoke management considerations for each burn. 4, there's plans to notify the public. 5, public education and awareness programs are in place. 6, surveillance and enforcement procedures regarding the procedures in the smoke management program are in place. And then finally, periodic evaluations of the smoke management plan's effectiveness are also a basic principle of a smoke management program. However, EPA gives states flexibility to tailor these programs to meet their unique needs. So modifications to these principles, or maybe even picking a few of these principles, would be allowed by EPA. Okay, my final slide is basically it's breaking down the smoke management program elements into 4. So we talked about 7 on the previous slide, but you could simplify it a lot and talk about 4 different principles. 1 is air pollution dispersion, 1 is air pollution reduction, the 3rd one is communication, and the 4th one is education. So as we sat down and talked about these issues with the Flint Hills, the primary question that came up was, well, what is most effective for the Flint Hills, given the fact that EPA allows states to tailor their plans to fit the circumstances at hand. So over the last few years, EPA has supported KDHE's efforts to work with the Flint Hills stakeholders on a smoke plan that is effective and tailored for the needs of the region. Doug Watson, who I'm going to turn this over from KDHE, turn this over to him in just a few minutes here, is going to go into some more detail about the plan itself and how KDHE attempted to tailor the plan specific to the needs of the Flint Hills stakeholders.
All right, thanks, Josh. My name is Doug Watson. I'm a meteorologist with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And some of this has been touched on by Gina, but a little bit of background about the Flint Hills ecosystem. It covers about 13, either whole or parts of 13 Kansas counties in the state of Kansas. Most of the prairie burns occur in the month of April, and the reasons for that are several. One is to improve cattle gain, weight gain, and to control invasive trees, shrubs, and plants from invading the prairie ecosystem. Safety and meteorological conditions limit the number of days that are suitable for burning in the month of April, and approximately 2.7 million acres were burnt in 2011. To give you an idea, that was a little bit above average over the last 10 years of how many acres are burnt every year in the Flint Hills. And finally, burning caused ozone exceedances in 2003, and then once again in 2009, 2010, and 2011. The graphic that's on the screen now, the black line is the outline of the tallgrass prairie ecosystem in the state of Kansas. And the colored counties there are the 13 counties that are included in the Flint Hills Smoke Management Plan. The Flint Hills do extend down into 3 northern Oklahoma counties, and those are also included in some of the tools that I will discuss later in some other slides. Just some pictures of the fires in the Flint Hills. Some of the reasons, like I touched on, cattle weight gain. In the lower right-hand corner there, the eastern red cedar is an invasive species in the Flint Hills, and if you do not burn for several years in the Flint Hills and the tallgrass prairie, you'll get cedar tree invasion, and before long a cedar tree forest. So why did the Kansas Department of Health and Environment and stakeholders do a smoke management plan? As Josh touched on a little bit, to reduce air quality and economic impacts on downwind metropolitan communities from the Flint Hills, an avenue for trying to receive an exemption or a flag in monitoring data that might be affected by the burning in the Flint Hills, and lastly, to maintain the Flint Hills ecosystem, and importantly, the related economy that goes along with that ecosystem. Just some background here on the burning and air quality. Like I mentioned before, we saw ozone exceedance in downwind metropolitan areas in the state in those 4 years listed there. Beginning in 2003, EPA and the KDHE met with agricultural representatives to discuss education, outreach, and field training, and to discuss air quality impacts that were being seen by the state of Kansas on downwind monitoring stations as a result of the burning in the Flint Hills. EPA denied KDHE's request back in 2009 to flag some data from some exceedances that we had from that year. And one of the reasons that were stated by EPA is because we did not have a smoke management plan for the Flint Hills. There was a commitment made to develop a smoke management plan in 2010, and I'll go into more detail of how that went about. The next few slides here give some, this was back in April of 2010, to give the folks on the webinar some idea of the extent that the smoke plume from these fires in the Flint Hills extends downwind from the Flint Hills in eastern Kansas. This was April 8th of 2010. The green is the smoke plume from the fires, and the little fire symbols are the number of satellite detected fires from a NOAA satellite. Like I said, this is a graphic from April 8th of 2010, just to show the extent of the smoke plume. This is the next day, April 9th, 2010. You can see the tremendous amount of fires that have increased in the Flint Hills of Kansas, and now the smoke plume reaches from southern Minnesota all the way down into Louisiana and on eastward. The next day, Saturday, April 10th, the smoke plume now from the fires in the Flint Hills has reached into the Great Lakes. And then on April 11th, you can see now the smoke plume has reached the Atlantic Ocean. You might ask the question of why there's just a narrow band there. We had a frontal system draped across the southern Great Lakes there, and the smoke was running up to that cold front and then running along that cold front out towards the east coast. So you can see the extent of the smoke plume from the fires in the Flint Hills and the, how far downwind those extend. So getting into the process of developing and getting to developing a smoke management plan, back in 2003, we saw the first ozone exceedances caused by the burning in the Flint Hills. We convened a conference of agricultural interests to present air quality issues at that time. We decided to take an initial voluntary and educational approach to addressing this issue. We held annual meetings between KDHE and all the agricultural stakeholders in this time frame, and there continued to occur some sporadic air quality issues, but we didn't see any exceedances after the 2003 between and up to 2008. In 2009, we saw a second significant air quality episode in April, in which both the Kansas City and Wichita metropolitan areas saw ozone exceedances. Like I mentioned before, KDHE submitted a data flagging exceptional event request, and that request was denied because we had no smoke management in place for the Flint Hills. At that time, the agricultural interest approached KDHE about writing a smoke management plan for the Flint Hills, and KDHE made several presentations to agricultural groups about the process involved and how that plan might be developed. The next year in 2010, we had another major air quality episode in April caused by the burning in the Flint Hills. At that time, some informal meetings and some formal hearings started to occur in the Kansas Senate Natural Resources Committee, and kind of growing out of those meetings and hearings, a formal Flint Hills Advisory Committee was formed, including some representatives and Senate members and our environmental director at KDHE. As part of that advisory committee, there were many members of the agricultural interests, fire and emergency management personnel, health officials, and urban representatives and environmental groups that were part of the process. At the first Smoke Management Plan Advisory Group meeting in April, a subcommittee was formed and tasked to actually write the Flint Hills Smoke Management Plan. It was a smaller group comprised of members of the advisory group and some other technical officials that were involved in writing the plan. This subcommittee met several times in late spring and early summer and basically developed an outline of what the Flint Hills Smoke Management Plan might look like, and then presented that outline to the next advisory group meeting that occurred in August of that year. There were some discussions and issues raised about that outline, and that was sent back to the subcommittee for further review. Additional meetings and conference calls, there were, I don't know how many now, there were a lot of conference calls and meetings of that subcommittee to kind of hammer out those remaining issues. The full draft of the smoke management plan was presented to the advisory committee at the third meeting in November of 2010. And then after that meeting, the draft plan was posted for 2 weeks on our website for public comment. The final public meeting was held in mid-December of 2010, in which the advisory group recommended that KDHE adopt the smoke management plan for the Flint Hills. And then there was lots of discussion after that adoption or recommendation for adoption about what the implementation strategy should be in the following months after the adoption by KDHE. KDHE formally adopted the plan in December of 2010, and immediately after that, implementation of the plan began to proceed. Josh touched on this a little bit, the requirements of a smoke management plan to reduce impacts of prescribed in wildland fire and public health, safety, and visibility, authorization restrictions on burning, minimize air pollution emissions, public education and awareness, enforcement, and program evaluation. Once you develop a plan and you implement it, is it working, and evaluate whether it's working and what needs to be done if it is not. The Flint Hills Smoke Management Plan itself has several sections in it. One of the most important sections is at the beginning that describes the Flint Hills ecosystem and the agricultural economy that it supports. It is a voluntary plan for the prescribed burns on the rangeland of the Flint Hills. It included many tools to assist land managers and local fire officials in making burn decisions. There was a pilot program to evaluate the use of a burn checklist that we provided to those that were doing prescribed fires out in the Flint Hills. Probably one of the biggest things that was developed was a website, and there's the web address ksfire.org, in which many of these tools were put on that website. It is a very good website, and one of the main tools on that website, which I'll get into here in a little bit, is a modeling tool that we developed with help from a private contractor. And there was also some restrictions on other types of burns only in the month of April in the 13 Flint Hills counties, and then 3 metropolitan counties that were included in that. So if they were not doing rangeland burning, then we restricted other types of burning in the month of April. The goals of the process of developing the smoke management plan was to be fully transparent, to include all perspectives that we could, to draw on all the available technical expertise. So instead of being a plan that the state of Kansas, that KDHE wrote, we invited as many stakeholders as possible into the development of the plan, so that it would be a plan that would work for the state of Kansas. And then finally, the most important thing would be, does the plan work? Now I'm going to talk a little bit, shift gears, and talk a little bit about the ksfire.org website and the tool that we developed, and specifically the modeling tool. This is the front page of the modeling tab. If you go to ksfire.org and click on the models tab, you'll come to this site, this page here, and it kind of describes what the model does and how it can be used by the folks that are doing this prescribed fires in the Flint Hills. The burn guidance tools, Sonoma Technologies was the contractor that worked with KDHE to develop this tool. There is a burn guidance by county for the next 2 days. So the graphic on the right-hand side there shows 2 days of, I believe that was April of 2011. You got 1 day on the left and the next day on the right. There also below that, there was some forecast discussion, and then over to the right, some extended outlooks, and then there is a county level burning scenario playground on another tab, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. This is kind of a blown up of the graphic that was on the slide before. The maximum contribution to major cities is based on a cumulative impact from the fires that would have been ignited each day. So in this case, April 6th and 7th of 2011. The counties were designated red, yellow, or green based on that county's contribution of smoke to downwind monitor locations. And it uses forecasted meteorology and expected emissions from large burns in those counties. So in this case, if you were in the counties that were color-coded red on April 6th, if you were lighting fires in those counties, you would make a significant contribution to a downwind monitor. If you were in a yellow county, it would be a medium contribution. If you were in green counties, you would make very small contributions to downwind air quality monitors. So if you look at the graphic on the right-hand side, if you waited until the next day to light your fires, a majority of those counties are now green, and you would not affect a downwind metropolitan area or downwind air quality monitor. So it's a tool to allow the land managers in the Flint Hills to make informed decisions about whether they should start their range fires on specific days or perhaps wait until the next day. Discussions were provided by meteorologists below the initial graphics up above, which describes what's the forecast for that day and the following day of what's driving some counties to be red and others to be green. Another tab on the modeling page is to allow individual landowners to input data from their individual fires by choosing their county, the size of their fire, and the fuel load of what they will be burning on their fire, and actually run the model to look at their individual plume and where that plume might go as in relationship to the downwind metropolitan areas or the air quality monitors. In this case, the red dot on the graphic is the fire location. The blue dots across the state are air quality monitors, and then you can see in the brown there is the plume that was run by the input that they put into the model. Some of the guidance that we used, they created a system that automatically runs blue sky. It's a model with high split each day to predict the smoke plume and movement and dispersion. The smoke plumes are derived from hypothetical burns. For the individual plumes, burn characteristics are provided, like I said, by the users. For the cumulative impacts on the other graphic where we just show the county colors, the burn characteristics are fixed. The smoke emission estimates are generated from the blue sky framework, and then weather inputs are used into blue sky, and those are from the NAM 40-kilometer forecast data. So some of the guidance, how that's generated: hypothetical fires are burned each day, assuming from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. The concentrations are tracked for 48 hours. For the individual fires, the hourly smoke plumes are mapped at a 15-kilometer resolution. And then for the cumulative impacts, the 24-hour surface PM concentrations from all the fires are summed by grid cells. And then if contribution is large and downwind concentration is high in the monitored locations, then that county is colored red. If they are medium, they are colored yellow. And if there's a small contribution, then those counties are color-coded green. This is just a graphic kind of showing how the summary of how the meteorology and the burn information is put into the model. Like I said, the meteorology is used as NAM. It's ran through a converter into the high split ready meteorology, and then ran into the high split dispersion run within blue sky. Fuel loading, burn acreage, burn location, and burn timing is inputted into the blue sky framework emissions model, which produces fire emissions, that are fed into the high split dispersion model within Blue Sky. And then out comes the smoke guidance with some look at that from meteorologists before it was put on the website. If you're needed to know a little more about the modeling tool, Sonoma just presented a presentation at a modeling conference about the system. If you go to the ksfire.org website and click on the regulations tab and go to the bottom of that page, there's a couple links down there that have the abstracts about a little bit more information about the modeling tool. The last slide I have here is just a slide to show the number of stakeholders that we involved in the process of developing the smoke management plan for the Flint Hills. And now I will turn it over to Carol from Kansas State University.
Hello, this is Carol, and I'm here to talk about the implementation of the smoke management plan and how we did the outreach and promotion of the plan. As you remember from the previous slides, the plan was approved in December of 2010, and we were asked to get the plan implemented immediately, which meant the burn season that was coming up in March and April was nearly upon us. So we had to work fast. First, we set out what we're trying to do. We talked about the challenges, who needed to know about the plan, what was going to work best, how are we going to get this outreach done, and then we got started. So a lot of outreach was needed because the plan is largely voluntary. And for the plan to work, it requires people knowing about the plan and then using the smoke tools to make decisions about when to burn. We decided on a joint agency effort. We have really good working relationships here in Kansas between the different agencies. Those are based on previous ways that we've worked together, and so this was a natural for us to just go ahead and build on those existing relationships. And we set out some goals to get started and evaluate some effectiveness. We identified our target audiences. There were several, and we concentrated this first year on the ranchers since they're the ones that actually control the burning. Then we started developing our messages. We just did the easy access to information, and the website that Doug showed you where the models are, that's actually a comprehensive educational website, which we used basically because the rumors going around about the smoke management plan were actually much worse than the plan itself was. So we wanted one place where everybody could go to get information. So the website was one of the first things that we got up and going. We did a radio interview series, and those were recorded and put on the website so that people that missed them when they were broadcasted could go back and hear them, and they covered a lot of the information about Flint Hills burning and the smoke management plan. We also put out some publications. We integrated as often as we could with other agencies' meetings and publications. So word about the smoke management plan went out in a lot of newsletters, a lot of regular meetings that different people were holding or routine meetings. It got added into those, besides the purpose meetings that we held just to talk about the plan. There was an informational listserv all up and down the Flint Hills where we sent out information and updates as things became available. This was another way to combat erroneous spread of information. They had a reliable source, and we could also give them some more timely information that way. We also utilized numerous press releases and news stories. Again, all the agencies did their part, and K-State did theirs also. Quite impressive how much coverage this got. Every year there is burn workshops held across Kansas, and the smoke plan was incorporated into the burn workshop information. So there was a lot going on. It was a really busy time, and the agencies that were involved were basically all the ones that helped write the plan. And that was one of the advantages to having that approach, is that because they had some input into the plan, they were very willing to help promote the plan once it was written. So we had lots going on and lots of people helping. After the burn season, we did some surveys. We tried to collect what information had been kept during the burn season, and then we looked at how the whole season turned out. So the first group we surveyed were burn bosses. These were the people that would make the decision whether or not to burn. And about 50% of them looked at the website, and about 40% used the plume smoke model prior to burning. They found of all the tools that the forecast model was the most useful. One of the things we found out was that a lot of them counted on their county emergency staff to tell them whether or not it was a good day to burn. In other words, rather than going to the website themselves, when they called them to say they were going to burn, they expected to get that information from the county. Those that did change their behavior based on smoke management considerations chose to burn fewer acres, to burn earlier, that is prior to the 1st of April, or to wait for a better day to burn. We also surveyed the county staff, which were more or less the front line in fielding calls on a lot of this. This could be sheriffs, it could be emergency managers, it could be dispatchers. And we asked them how it impacted their normal workload. We found out that they had more staff meetings, that they were uncertain about the role that they were being suddenly asked to be in, which is this knowledge about smoke and what days were good to burn and not. We did ask them to track the acreage burned. There was some compliance with this. It varies a lot by county. Some counties were already doing this, but most counties are not. And also, we did, a lot of them said that they were going to review their burning regulations after the 2011 burn season because of not only the smoke management plan, but because there was a tremendous amount of burning going on. As you recall, 2011 was an exceptionally heavy burning season. We support the counties and their efforts to monitor the burning that's going on in their counties. And on our website, we have a special tab that says County Burn Regulations. And when you click on that tab, it breaks out to the counties. And each county there's a list of the counties and the rules for that county for burning. And this is one way that we can support what the counties are doing. So the summer of year one, we had an extensive outreach campaign. We did the evaluation after the burn season. There was a policy change. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And we had 4 exceedances. So our overall goal of reducing the number of smoke exceedances was not met that year. So we're going to year 2, and this would have been starting in about January of this year. We decided to go back and pick up some outreach efforts that we missed the first time just for lack of time, and also because we didn't see some of the things that we needed to do. One of the constant comments we got back is, why is the air quality in the Flint Hills, why is prescribed burning being, why is everyone saying it's all about prescribed burning? You know, the cities aren't doing anything to help their air quality. They should be taking care of their air quality, and it wouldn't be such an issue when we burn. So the cities obviously had a different take on that, and we put together a publication called Air Quality in Kansas Urban Areas, What is Being Done and What could Happen. And we listed what these cities were doing, which is actually quite extensive, to improve their air quality. And we also gave a scenario that if they fail to meet their air quality, how that impacts the cities. And that was actually very useful in outreach later during the year. We did a second set of radio interview series, and again, I posted them to the website. Again, we collected data on the acres burned, and we targeted additional audiences. We got outside of Kansas. We got into Oklahoma. We did put their 3 counties on our listserv so they would get updates that were going on in about smoke management. We did a presentation in Oklahoma, and we had some discussions with the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. We also did some county and agency outreach within Kansas. We found out as we went along that a lot of publicity is both good and bad. A lot of people knew about the plan, but there was a lot of increased scrutiny because of that. We did some national regional presentations, and we participated in SMOKE, which is a national group that deals with air quality issues. So some of the things that came up, first in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see FSA Exhibit 5, page 2. One of the things that the Farm Service Agency did for CRP land is they allowed a second burning season in July. This was new for Kansas, and that gave those with CRP who did not need to burn in April a chance to burn at a different time and shift some of the smoke production to a different time of the year. We also got an article on the web edition of the Wall Street Journal that made it sound like we weren't working together, which was really very discouraging to all of us. And there was a need to respond to that. And one of the issues that we came up with is we didn't have a good plan in place on how to respond to something like that. And so we wrote a letter to the editor pointing out what we thought were some fallacies in the article, and they didn't publish it. And so we talked about why, how we would handle this next time. And one of the things that we decided is that we needed probably our own social media outlet for publishing responses, because it will be much quicker than and more sure than waiting for someone else to read it and then decide whether or not to post it. The part that says U.S. air quality, we started getting picked up by national news media, what was going on in the Flint Hills and the smoke and burning issue. So again, it was increased scrutiny. And then up in the upper left-hand corner, there was a renewed effort to get the Flint Hills exempted from air quality standards. And that was a legislative venture by Kansas and Oklahoma. So one of the unexpected outcomes was we did some international presentations on smoke. I actually ended up doing 3 in Russia this year and 1 in Australia. In addition, we are producing some videos, 1 targeted toward producers and 1 targeted toward urban audiences. The producer one will replace basically, or will basically cover the same material that we covered in all our meetings the first year, and will be available for counties to use whenever they hold their meetings. The urban video we are hoping to get on PBS in Kansas City, and it will give a broader view of the issue of smoke management and prescribed burning. We're also working on a journal publication on outreach efforts, and also working with the Great Plains Fire Science Consortium and other Joint Fire Science Program consortia on their smoke management plans. One of the things that became evident when we were working with these diverse audiences is, especially when you talk to an urban audience, they don't care about livestock. That's not really what interests them. The other ecosystem services that rangelands provide are actually much more important. Things like wildfires and carbon sequestration, recreation and open space, water quality and wildlife habitat. These are all things that are much more important, and you need to include in your message when you're talking about prescribed burning. We found some room for improvement in what we were already doing. The counties, there was a lot of difference between how the local emergency managers handled questions and how they responded to their constituents, and there was kind of a need to more standardize what was going on there. We also talked about continued outreach, perhaps even getting smoke warnings as part of the TV weather forecast, just like they do pollen warnings. And we're looking at which audiences we need to reach, and we've reached Kansas City, Kansas, that area pretty well. But you know, the city does not stop at the state line, so we're talking about whether we need to move into Missouri too to talk to them. Also, people using our smoke model look at the green days and they say, oh, it's a good day to burn. Unfortunately, that's not true. It's a good day for smoke dispersion, and lots of times a good day for smoke dispersion is not a good day to burn because it means there's high winds. And so we had some people thinking that we were recommending that they burn that day, and we had some fires on days when they should not have occurred. We need to emphasize more people to call in their burns based on satellite estimates. The number of acres burned and the number that are reported, there is a significant discrepancy there. We need to continue our work on alternatives to burning in April each year. And we need to clarify liability issues. And this is a really huge problem and has come up again and again and again, is what happens if the fire gets away? Can we get insurance, and if so, how? And what is the legal framework, because that varies from state to state. And in a prescribed burn, someone is far more likely to die from smoke issues than from fire issues. There are some conundrums that have come to me as I've worked with this, and basically days with good smoke dispersal are often too windy to burn. The wind direction needed to avoid local conditions or local hazards may be exactly the right wind conditions to burn in to avoid putting smoke in the urban areas. And the burning has to continue to maintain the ecosystem, but air quality must be maintained to meet EPA standards. So these are just some things that you have to balance when you're working on your plan. I have a couple slides of final thoughts here. Policy and regulation do affect prescribed burning. The more regulation there is, the less prescribed burning there will be, even if it's still allowed. There's going to have to be choices between environmental and ecological needs. And both of these are important, and there is no single right answer for everyone. And also we need to discuss what is politically and regulatory possible, because sometimes regulations and the political environment in the state are at odds on this. So when you start out about all the possible goals that you can have, and you start putting out picking out the ones that you want to meet, the ones that you can meet, and then you add some socioeconomic constraints, you don't have very many choices when you get done. It's just something to think about when you're working through this. So for the Flint Hills, prescribed burning is both ecologically and financially important. It's largely carried out by private landowners on their own timetable and at their own expense. The benefits of prescribed burning are shared by the public, but so is the impaired air quality when there are smoke issues. And that's the end of my presentation.
Josh, Gina, Tom, Doug, and Carol, thank you all so much for this very important work you're doing and for taking the time to share it via this presentation. And thank you to all the attendees for bearing through our few minor technical challenges. Unfortunately, we do not have time to take any questions, though I would like to say something briefly that the two co-sponsoring consortia, the Great Plains and the Oak Woodlands consortiums, we strive to disseminate fire science information, and we hope you find these broadcasts valuable. Please visit the websites that are listed on the screen for more information about upcoming fire science sharing opportunities, and please join us and join our fire conversations on Facebook and Twitter. And thank you all again very much.
And this is Carol. If you have questions, if you will send them to me by email, I'll make sure they get answered.